Now we'd like to read something from Mr. Brad Robertson, our brother in the Lord Jesus Christ. And hope atin pong namnamin kung ano man po yung mga revelations na atin pong makukuha, including me po Meron din po akong mga bagong natutuklasan at nagpapasalamat po ko sa Panginoong Jesus dahil unti-unti po niyang ina-unveil sa akin at pati na rin po sa inyo ang mga katotohanang sana'y dapat pa natin noon nalaman. So, ito na po. Babasahin ko na po. If you are down on yourself because you are not committed and devoted to the church as your church leaders say you should be, if you are made to feel guilty because you are not involved in your church as your church leaders say you should be, if you are made to feel guilty by your church leaders because you do not have your priorities in order since you put other things above the church, if you are made to feel like you will never grow spiritually until you prioritize your life and become more committed, devoted, and involved in the church, I want to encourage you. The Christian life is not about how involved, committed, and devoted you are to the programs of the church. The Christian life is not about making the programs of the church a greater priority in your life than your favorite sport team, hobby, or other parts of your life. Church commitment, devotion, and involvement does not produce spiritual growth. Making the programs of your church a greater priority in your life does not produce spiritual growth. Spiritual growth comes from understanding the truths of the new covenant of grace, which sadly the majority of Christians have never been taught by their church leaders. When a person understands the truths of grace, spiritual growth happens naturally. No commitment required. No devotion required. No involvement required. No prioritizing the programs of your church above the parts of your life. Grace produces growth. It's that simple. There was a group of people in the Bible whose hearts were encouraged and strengthened through grace. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 16. There was a group of people in the Bible who experienced tremendous spiritual growth the moment they understood God's grace in all of its truth. Colossians chapter 1, verses 3 to 8. It wasn't commitment, devotion, and involvement that produced spiritual growth in their lives. Spiritual growth came from understanding the grace of Jesus. Don't be pressured or guilted by your church leaders into being more committed and devoted to your church by being involved in its programs. If your church leaders are not teaching you the truths of God's grace through the finished work of the Lord Jesus Christ, maybe the problem with your spiritual growth is not your commitment or devotion, but theirs. Biblical church leaders are those who are committed and devoted to the teaching the truths of God's grace through the finished work of the Lord Jesus Christ to the church family. Maybe it is the church leaders who need to be more committed and devoted to the teaching the truths of God's grace to the church family. Paul, the first church planter, was sent on a mission by the ascended Jesus to communicate God's grace to people and to start grace-based churches. Churches that educated people about the grace of Jesus. Acts chapter 20, verses 23 to 24. It is time for our church leaders to educate the church family about the truths of grace rather than manipulate the church family into being more committed, devoted, and involved. I want to encourage you. If you have been pressured or guilted by your church leaders into being more committed, to devoted to, and involved in your church, and consequently you are feeling like you are not as good of a Christian as you should be, may I introduce you to the loving grace of Jesus. Grace is everything God has done for you in Jesus, leaving you nothing to do but to rest in all He has done for you. No pressure, no guilt, no manipulation, just grace, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ. No devotion needed either, no commitment needed, no involvement needed, just grace. Simply grace. Just Jesus. Simple Jesus. Ang ating pong natunghayan ng mga magandang katotohanan ito ay galing po sa ating mahal na kapatid na si Ginoong Brad Roberts. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Pagpalain tayo nawa, or should I say, blessed tayo lagi because of Jesus. God bless you. And Jesus truly loves us all.